Okay, ready? All right. Well, good evening, folks. Good evening. Kind of like Alfred Hitchcock. So my name is Joe Fahey, and I'm originally from Belleville, but that was 50-some years ago. And since then, I went to the University of Wisconsin, and after that, I spent 40 years in the corporate world. So I lived all over the country, and as part of my job, I traveled all over the world. In the last 20 years, I was responsible for international marketing for a Japanese company. So that gave me the opportunity to travel to all the continents except Antarctica. There's not a lot of demand there. And so I really feel blessed about having these opportunities to really see the world. And you know, in business travel, there's a lot of, fly to the airport, you go to a hotel, you have a meeting, go back to the airport. That wasn't my situation. In my case, I was marketing handheld power equipment, so engine-driven products. And so I would go see how they were used. So I'd go to the jungles, go to farms and plantations all over the world. And really, that's where you see the culture. That's where, so they say, the rubber meets the road. So fast forward, I retired a few years ago, and so I said, okay, day one of retirement. Now, you've never had this experience, but for me, it's, so now what? You gotta start all over again. So I started out by cutting grass for the university. Well, okay. Making tall grass short only has so much mental stimulation, let's put it that way. So then I thought about the fact that for all over the years, I've took pictures and had these great experiences. Why don't I do something with it? So I started going through my pictures, and they started kind of falling into buckets. And as a result, I decided I would share these experiences, because to me, gathering experiences is one thing, but the ability to share them with people who are interested, those with curious minds. And those of you who are here tonight clearly have curious minds. And so that's what I do. I created 17 different presentations about different places around the world. And I give them at libraries and senior centers and civic groups. It keeps me busy, and that's really good. So I started this process, and I've given over 200 of them around the area. And one day, my son said, "You should really do a podcast." Now, I'm not doing a podcast. Okay, you can get my podcast on my website. So then my wife said, "You should write a book." And I said, "I'm not going to write a book." There it is. And that's kind of why we're here tonight, all right? So I actually, once it dawned on me that, yes, this is something I can do, I sat down with a clean sheet of paper. And I thought, well, there are things I could talk about. And so I just started listing anecdotes, things that happened, things that were good, that were not so good, things that were very interesting, things that were historical. So I started making notes. And I came up with 35 different topics. I thought, well, okay, that's a good start. So then I started writing, and there would be nights I'd lay in bed. You ever lay in bed and stare at the ceiling? And I'd stare at the ceiling and go, well, wait a minute, this happened. And so I had the phone next to me, and I'd send myself a text, send myself an email to remind myself to put that on the list. And so when it was all said and done, I had 75 stories. And so when I went to publish, I said, okay, I'm gonna eliminate the 5 that are my least favorite. And so the book is a compilation of 75 stories, anecdotal stories of things that happened. Now, this is over the course of 50 years. And, okay, I know I don't look that old. So that's kind of an admission between us girls, okay? So this evening, it's an author event, but it's not a typical author event. For those of you who have been to author events, they're typically fiction. And when the author gets up, they talk about, well, the main character, and character development, and plot, and how they open the book and close it and weave the plot through it. You get none of this tonight, none, because I am the character, and it doesn't need any more development. So basically, it's a memoir, and sometimes people say, "Well, you're going to what's your next book?" I said, "Listen, I only have so many memoirs in me, and I think this is it." So this morning, I received a very interesting email. And for me to look at this book, it's kind of hard to put in words what it means. But I often find that other people who read it say it much better than I do. I kind of ramble and go all over the place. But I received an email this morning from my high school English teacher. And she read it. And I just want to read part of it to you, because I thought she captured the essence of what the book is. She said, "What adventures you've had. Your stories are so full of detail that I'm thinking you must have kept a travel journal from the very start." I didn't. "Way back to your first journey after college graduation. You were lucky to find the kind of career that allowed all these opportunities for travel. But it wasn't just luck. You approached all these experiences in ways lots of travelers never do, with an open mind and heart, leaving any sense of American privilege behind, ready to laugh at yourself, which seems like an essential for foreign travel to me." And I think that describes it very well. And I really appreciate the words that she said, because it's true. I tried to do this with an open mind and an open heart. Now, boy, that's a long introduction. So you'll notice we have a presentation here, and I've also named this an immersive book discussion. Now, immersive is kind of trendy, because King Tut has an immersive show that's traveling, and Renoir has one. A number of the great artists have immersive shows where the reason I call it immersive is that since this is a memoir, these things really happen. And so I can show you pictures to substantiate the stories. Now, I'm not going to tell you 70 stories, obviously. We don't have all night. But I want to share 3 with you, okay? So this, at the risk of sounding like this is a class, I have an agenda, and I've often been accused of having an agenda. So first, we're going to ask a couple of tough questions, and this is where you guys are potentially in trouble. So a couple of tough questions. Then I'm going to review my rules for international travel. Those are my rules, not somebody else's. Then we're going to talk about a fun story. And it's called Monkeys on the Rocks. Don't worry, it's highly edited. And then we're going to have a bittersweet story, and that's Oration in Yalabuga. And then we're going to have a dramatic story, which is Crazed Cockney Cabbie. And then I'm going to end it with some parting thoughts. So what I'd like to do is show you what happened, read a short section from it, so you get a sense of what the story is, okay? So, without further ado, the tough questions. What do these characters have in common? Now, you may be familiar with some of these. For example, Joseph Stalin, or Agatha Christie, Julius Caesar, Genghis Khan, Michael the Archangel, King Tut, Colonel Sanders, and Hermann Goring. Kind of an odd cast of characters, and I wouldn't say there's a direct correlation between any of these, other than the fact that they are sub-characters to my stories. So all of these characters play a part in at least one of the stories. And the other question is, have you ever wanted to experience nude beaches in the French Riviera? Or the Trans-Siberian Railroad? Machu Picchu? Golf at St. Andrews? Baseball game in Tokyo? This is the Bay Stars game? Formula One race in Monaco? Or Oktoberfest in Germany? Or maybe just go floating in the Dead Sea? Again, these are all different stories that are within the book. And what's important to understand is when you travel, there's all kinds of things happen that are interesting, that are funny, that are not so funny, and I try to touch on all of them. So there are different emotions that run through this book. But I wrote it in a very lighthearted manner. A lot of the catastrophes happen to me or him. Okay. Now, rules for international travel. After I wrote the book, I wrote the introduction. And as I was writing the introduction, I thought about, I really had some unwritten rules. So I thought, you know what, I might as well write them down. So I thought about the unwritten rules. Number one, do what you're told. Would you just do what you're told? When you're traveling internationally, whether you're with a large group of people or you're traveling on your own, this is no time to go lone wolf. This is no time to go exploring. I mean, I've traveled with some people who went to places they should not have gone and could have been a disaster for them and for others. So stay within the lines if you can. Number two, pay attention. We saw so many people who they didn't know what they were looking at or totally missed some great opportunities. When we first went to Europe when we were 21, we saw some bad tourists. And that kind of, I'm going to say, scarred me for life, because I never wanted to be that person. And so it was embarrassing at best. So I really wanted to set a pattern of behavior. One of them is pay attention. It's amazing. You see people walk by incredible sites or historic sites. I almost did it once at the British Museum. Now, the British Museum is one of the greatest museums in the world, and you're so awestruck, you can't believe what you're seeing. So I'm walking through the museum, and I glanced down, and I kept walking. And I thought about it, and I thought, that kind of looks like the Rosetta Stone. It was the Rosetta Stone. I had no idea. But had I not been paying attention, I would have walked right by the Rosetta Stone, which would have been very disappointing for me anyway. So pay attention. Be respectful. We all want to be respected. And it starts with giving that respect. And so you need to respect others. You need to respect the cultures. It's just very important. I must say that over 50 years of international travel, I was always treated, almost always treated respectfully, and I gave it back in kind. It's very, very important. This is the most important one. Eat what's in front of you. Food is the biggest, to me, the most important element of culture, because everybody identifies with the food. And when you're a foreigner and you reject their food, that's personal. That's personal. And so it's really important to eat what's in front of you. And when you're in Japan or when you're in some of these countries, and I've eaten things that I really would rather not, and I don't even like to think about it, but I ate it and I smiled. And then I complimented the chef. And complimenting the chef, just be complimentary. Grease the skids. It's not that hard, and it gets you a long way. So those are my rules for international travel. Now, the first story is Monkeys on the Rocks. And this is back in winter of 1975. You may not be familiar with 1975, but a certain gentleman in this room and I were sitting in a bar on State Street. And one of us said, hey, why don't we go to Europe for the summer? To which the other one said, sure. And surprisingly, we did it. Now, this is that guy. And so Bill and I went to Europe for 8 weeks. And we had a backpack and a Eurail pass and a tent and no agenda. So here we're having a beer at the Hofbrauhaus. And it was an incredible experience. Now, as we were getting ready to go, he said, I have a camera. I said, wow, that's great. For those of you who weren't around 1975, that's an Instamatic. Excuse me. So that was our camera.
Did you pick that up at the British Museum?
It's older than the Rosetta Stone. So, and it was slide film. And so some of the pictures I'm going to show you may not be the highest quality, but they kind of give you an idea. And I would like to thank Bill, because 2 years ago, he handed me a jump drive with the digitized pictures that I had not seen in many decades. So thank you for doing that. So that being said, the story starts in Geneva, Switzerland. And when students would travel, there were a lot of students who travel, and you stay at youth hostels, you meet people, you share stories, you say, hey, you should go here, don't go here. And so one night in Geneva, we met a gentleman named Finn. And Finn was Danish, so he was Finn the Dane. And Finn the Dane was telling us about this incredible youth hostel down on the French Riviera. And he said, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. There's a nude beach, and all I heard after that was blah, 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 blah. Because he kind of stopped me in my tracks. And then he said, and I will take you there. Sold. Done deal. So we hopped a train to Marseille, and it was an overnight train, which is very economical. We were trying to do the Europe on $5 a day. We were close. We were pretty close to that. And if you sleep on a train overnight, that's free lodging. So we took the overnight train, and then when we got to Marseille, we took a short train to Cassis. Now, when we got to Cassis, we're following, he's our leader, so he said, now we have to buy food, supplies, because there's no food where we're going. So we purchased enough for 2-3 days. So we carry the food and we start walking. He said, it's out of town, so just follow me. So we start walking down the road out of town. And after a while, said, so where are we going? And he said, oh, we're going up there. Really? Okay. So there was a path that he knew of, and so we're climbing up this thing. So, now we've got like a 30-pound backpack, and we're carrying food, and sometimes off horse. And I'm thinking, we don't know this guy. I'm hoping this was a good idea. So we get to the top, and he goes, there it is. I goes, there's what? He goes, oh, it's there on the horizon. So we still have to cross this terrain to get to the youth hostel. But when we got there, it was everything he said. Everything. It was simple, it was basic. There was a kitchen, and there was a men's dormitory and a women's dormitory, and not much more. But man, did it have a view. And so I had a view of this beautiful cove, and so it was great. Now, that's where I'm going to start reading for a little bit. That night we experienced the true essence of a youth hostel. We were in the middle of nowhere with no amenities and no distractions. After eating, all the students gathered outside the picnic tables under a tree and talked to each other. That's when people talk to each other. It was an amazing thing. We got to know everyone there and their stories. We took turns playing pétanque, which is the French version of bocce. Since we were in the desert, we played on packed dirt, which was perfect. All this with the Mediterranean shimmering in the distance. It just doesn't get any better. So much for questioning Finn. During the course of the evening, we met two sisters from Oklahoma. Debbie was an undergrad. Now, this is Bill, this guy over here, and that's Finn. Here are the two sisters, and this young lady was from Germany. Debbie was an undergrad, and Carol was older and in her second year of med school. Typically, we tried to avoid Americans as we often found them annoying, but the sisters were delightful, and we enjoyed their company. Did I mention they were attractive? Due to the location, darkness didn't arrive until almost 10 p.m., and when it did, it was time to go to bed. There was no staying up late, as the generator was down for the evening. We slept well that night. The next morning, people were anxious to head to the cove as the beating sun was getting hot. Groups started to form, and we conveniently convinced our new friends from Oklahoma to join us on our trek to the water. When we got there, the four of us found an area to lay our towels, and the sisters immediately and unabashedly bared all. I don't know what Bill was thinking, but I was in a panic. What were we supposed to do? Do we look or do we not look? It felt like the classic scenario with the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. I didn't want to come off like the hick that I was, but a situation like this doesn't come around every day. I think I ended up being discreet, but my idea of discretion in someone else's may not be the same. So that's a little bit of a coming of age type story. It was just a fantastic experience, and more happened after that. So now, the bittersweet story, which is Oration in Yolabaga. Now, this looks like almost a word salad alternating vowels and consonants, but I was in Russia, and I was on business, and I was traveling with our distributor visiting dealers. So we were in Tatarstan, which is a republic, and the Russian definition of republic isn't exactly the same as ours, but it is a republic, and Kazan is the capital, and so we had driven to Yelabuga. So once I got there, I took this picture, and it's kind of what you would imagine as a small city in the middle of Tatarstan. Not a lot to it. So I was taken, or we went to the kind of the Chamber of Commerce library, sort of, and I was introduced to a lady there, and I was told she's going to give me a tour of the city. Now, who can turn down a tour of Yelabuga? You don't get that offer very often. So first we went to a city park, and this is her, and I thought, oh boy, tour of a park, this ought to be exciting. Well, it kind of was, actually, because it's so clever. This park, the theme is these two metal people, okay? They're made of pipe and glass, and a female and a male. And if you look down the sidewalk, there's benches alternating, and each one of these benches tells a story of their relationship. Very clever. So, for example, the first bench this is how they met. They're on a bench, she's reading a book, they bump into each other. He's very dapper with his walking stick and top hat. So this is how they met, and the next bench is this is when they fell in love, and the next bench was his proposal. And so it just went on and on about having kids and raising children. It was very touching and very clever, very nicely done. So I really appreciated that part of the tour. So then she said, next we will go see Fort. Okay, so we went to this hilltop location, and when I got out of the car, great panorama, beautiful panorama. And I was standing next to Maria, who was traveling with me, and she said something that has always stuck with me. And we're both looking at the landscape, and just looking forward, she said, "Da, this is Mother Russia." And I thought, I don't know if she's talking to me or talking to herself. To this day, I don't know. But it spoke volumes about the pride that they have in their country. And it's just a very patriotic statement and a love of Russia. So that really impacted me. So anyway, to the left was the fort that they wanted to show me. Now this is what's left. It was built in the 11th century. And remember I was going to talk about Genghis Khan? So this fort was built when the Genghis Khan and the Golden Horde were sweeping across the steppes. Didn't help. They got conquered. But anyway, so it was really because of Genghis Khan this fort was built. Now, this is where the next story begins. We walked down to the ruins and stood before the one remaining tower. Our guide explained the mystical powers of the tower. It was able to grant wishes. Don't see that every day. She then instructed me to put both hands on the tower and make a wish. Making a meaningful wish on command was a challenge for me. On short notice, I was torn between world peace and what we would have for dinner. I did what I was told, which is rule number 1, after which she said, "Now you will give speech." I had no idea what she was talking about, as there was nothing about a speech on the agenda. Of course, there was no agenda either. Apparently, I wasn't on the need-to-know list. I followed her back to the car, wondering what I'd gotten myself into this time. We were taken back to the Chamber of Commerce building where we originally met. I looked at Aki. Aki is a Japanese fellow who worked in my department. And he didn't know what was going on either. Our guide then took us into a large gathering room where 2 rows of couches faced each other and a long table was between them. The table contained a wide variety of sweets and a pot of tea. On one side of the table sat 6 lovely ladies, ranging in age from their late teens to 20s. I was formally introduced to the English Club of Yelabuga. It turns out I was a curiosity to them. They had studied English for years, but had never conversed with a person who spoke English as a first language. As you can imagine, not many Westerners make their way to Yelabuga. They wanted to hear me speak and try out their English skills with me. Aki spoke English very well, but it was a second language for him, so he didn't count. Sorry, Aki. I had to talk for a while and then somehow get them to talk. I started by introducing myself and discussing my background. I then asked them questions about themselves to get them talking. As expected, they were hesitant to speak because they felt their English was poor. Not true. They were easy to converse with, and I told them. This reduced the tension and they became more conversant. They wanted to know what America was like, as that topic was clearly top of mind for them. I then asked the big question. If you went to America, where is the one place you would like to visit? What do you think?
New York City. LA.
It's Disneyland. Hey, when people think of America, it's one big Disneyland, you know? I was surprised that every one of them gave the same answer, Disneyland. We all had a good laugh over that. After about 30 minutes, it was time to go. We took a group picture, and I again complimented the ladies on their efforts and told them that their English skills were very good. They all smiled and, I hope, went home feeling more confident about their English speaking abilities. My business travels have been laced with many surprises, but this was one of the best. I really appreciated the opportunity to speak with these young ladies. On one hand, I felt like I had done something good for them. However, I also felt kind of sad about the experience. They want to see America so badly, yet deep down, I was sure it would never happen. The probability of them ever getting out of Yelabuga was very low, but for one day they could dream. So it was, you know, these stories are anecdotal, and this was just a wonderful experience to meet a group of people in a place that, what are the odds of meeting the English Club of Yelabuga? So it was wonderful. Now, the last story. This is a heart stopper. Crazed Cockney cabbie. So, anybody been to London? Ridden in a taxi there? Okay, all right. London taxis in London are very unique, and they are made by the London Taxi Company specifically for them, and it's a great design. Now, these aren't my pictures because I hadn't planned on having an incredible experience trying to get to the airport. So I had to borrow some pictures, but it helps tell the story. Excuse me. So I was in London, and I was had a meeting with an ad agency, and had a great meeting. And when I was done, I had a hotel reservation at a hotel outside of Heathrow Airport, and then I was going to fly home the next morning. So I asked the ad agency, where can I get a taxi? And they said, well, there's a taxi stand just at the end of the block. So I bid adieu and went down to the taxi stand. In a few minutes, sure enough, a taxi showed up. Now, these taxis are really comfortable. They're easy to get in and out of, and there's a huge area where when you get in, there's room for 2 or 3 people on the seat, and there's room for your baggage. There's not much of a trunk, so there's room for your baggage right where you sit. But there's also some fold-down seats, so you can get 5 people in there. And then there's a plexiglass screen, and then you can pay using your credit card right from your seat. So I'm at the taxi stand, and taxi shows up right on schedule. Fine. And so I said, I want to go to Heathrow. And the guy kind of grunted and, okay, slammed the door, off we go. It was a little strange, okay? Any Harry Potter fans? Okay, all right. You know Argus Filch? He looked exactly like Argus Filch. Argus Filch was the groundskeeper at Hogwarts. Kind of a seedy guy, kind of a shady character. This is exactly what he looked like. But you know what? All I want is a ride to the hotel. So to get to the hotel, you just get on the M4, and it takes you all the way to Heathrow. And my hotel is right by Heathrow. So it's not a hard place to find. However, as we went along, I got a strange feeling that he didn't really know where he was going. I recall he asked me a question that inferred his unfamiliarity with Heathrow. Really? A cabbie who doesn't know Heathrow? I started to wonder about his experience or credentials to be a London cabbie. His question also reveals something else. He had a very heavy Cockney accent that was somewhat difficult to understand. Ultimately, I started seeing signs for Heathrow. At least we were going in the right direction. That was the good news. We were on the road that led to Heathrow when I spotted my hotel. We were flying by, and he was either oblivious or he was padding the fare. I wasn't sure what his agenda was, but I did take the precaution of glancing at the meter for future reference. Things were starting to get interesting. The trip continued into Heathrow Airport. We drove around all the terminals and then followed the exit. I was watching his every move very intently, concerned about what was to transpire. Fortunately, he took the correct frontage road, and in a couple of minutes, he pulled up in front of the hotel. What a relief. That's when things really got interesting. Remember when I said I try to keep a low profile when I travel internationally? This was one of those rare moments when I forgot my own mantra. When he finally stopped, I looked at the meter, and the final charge was £5 higher than when we passed the hotel the first time. Now, if I were thinking logically, I would have realized that I was on company business and the fare would be submitted to my expense account. I think the company could absorb an extra £5. However, I hate getting ripped off, especially by taxi drivers. I have a real bad history with taxi drivers, by the way, so this really hit a nerve. Unfortunately, logic wasn't my priority. I was in the moment. Are you going to charge me for the tour of Heathrow? Was my ill-fated question. He clearly took umbrage to my simple question. He turned to face me and started screaming, his Cockney accent preventing me from understanding most of the words. The message was pretty clear, though. As he screamed, I got a full view of his ivories, and there was nothing ivory about them. Also, a few of them were notably missing. The plexiglass security shield I mentioned earlier came into play here. It protected me from all the spit that was coming from his mouth, and more importantly, it kept him from coming at me. He was really unhinged. And then it got really creepy. There was a slight pause, and he turned his head farther so he could look me in the eye. He then said in a very slow and threatening voice, I have no sympathy for you. That's exactly how he said it. Each word was spoken very deliberately in his thick Cockney dialect. I felt like I was in a horror movie and was the most uncomfortable I've ever been. He clearly mistook me for some hotshot executive, and he didn't like my type. It was profiling at its finest. Maybe it's just me, but I don't think his demeanor was well suited for his profession. After that dramatic oration, I quickly ran my credit card through the reader, grabbed my bag, and got the hell out of his car. The extra £5 suddenly looked quite reasonable for a scenic tour of Heathrow. I flung the door open and almost hit the hotel doorman. It turns out he'd been standing there watching the whole episode. Thanks for the help. As I said, taxis in London are quite unique. So, yeah, I don't get along with taxis very well. And there are a number of stories in there. Road rage in Paris. I got taken for a ride in Italy. So I have my moments with taxis. So, final thoughts. When I wrote the summary, you tell all these stories, and you have to have a point. So what is the point? And I have a couple of points. First of all, I feel so blessed to have been in the right place at the right time, to have had a career where I could see the world, get paid to do it, and have all these wonderful experiences. And so I feel that it's also a privilege to be able to share these experiences with people with curious minds. And when you when you have all these experiences with different cultures, a couple of things that I learned. One of them is not to be judgmental, in that, you're there as their guest, and it's an opportunity to observe and to learn. And so I've been in countries that are under communist rule, that are run by drug lords, different religions, many different circumstances which are different from my own. But they're just different. Doesn't mean they're right or wrong, but the point is to observe and to learn. And the other thing is, just because I'm trying to be judgmental doesn't mean the other people are trying to be judgmental. And so as a result, and this kind of goes back to the rules of engagement or the rules of behavior, I tried not to give them a reason to confirm a stereotype or to even create a stereotype. Oh, Americans are like this, or I always felt like I was an ambassador. An ambassador representing something. It could be the company, it could be the country, it could be religion, it could be my race, it could be my gender. It could be anything. So I tried not to confirm or create stereotypes. So as a result, I have all these wonderful adventures. I was always treated well, except when we were locked in the garage in Ireland. That wasn't so good. But that's another story. So I feel privileged to be able to share the adventures and the cultural nuances that I've been able to experience. Any questions? Thank you for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it.